What do you do when happily ever after comes to a grinding halt and I do becomes I don't? Author Laura Petherbridge has some answers in her book as she offers practical steps for healing during separation and divorce. And we are so happy that she's joining us on the couch today. Laura, welcome to Full Circle.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. Now, you make a comment right at the beginning of your book that I found really interesting and eye-opening. You say divorce is worse than death because it's chosen abandonment.
That's correct. And sometimes people will get a little bit offended by that if they've lost a spouse to death. They think, well, that you're minimizing the pain and the grief of losing a spouse. And that's not what I mean. What I'm saying is it's a chosen rejection. Should my husband die, he's not choosing to walk out on me. And so the layers of loss, there are more of them when a spouse walks out than when they die. When you go through a divorce, you lose your in-laws, you lose your pets, you lose your health insurance, you lose your income, you lose your home many times.
Often your friends.
Often your friends. Many people lose their church. And so the layers of loss are so very, very significant. And, you know, if my husband had died, people would be showing up on my front porch with a tuna casserole. Well, when he walked out, they didn't do that. As a matter of fact, many of them stepped away, stepped back, felt they had to take sides, so it can be much more painful.
And you know, your experience, as you said, your husband walked out on you and it was through an affair, so you kind of had the kosher divorce.
Yes.
In terms of the faith community, and that's what you experienced. How much worse is it for people when it's not as clear cut and people might be taking sides even more or blaming
That's right.
one or the other or both?
Believe me, I get emails from those also, and they are devastated because I have many people that tell me losing my spouse was horrible, but my church turning their back on me was the worst. You know, that it was worse than losing their spouse.
Well, what would you say to the church, you know, in terms of how can we better minister to the needs of people who are going through this really horrific experience?
Well, the first thing I would encourage them to do is to start hosting a divorce recovery support group. You know, they can use something like my book. I wrote it intentionally with questions at the end of each chapter, so it can be used in a small group. The thing that the church often fears is they think if they minister to people going through divorce that they're condoning divorce. And so you can still keep a firm line of saying we value marriage. We honor marriage. We view marriage as sacred. God hates divorce, but he doesn't hate divorced people. He loves divorced people.
Right.
And so there's where we have to get that line of saying, and you know what, probably 95% of the people, I've been doing this 20 years, 95% of the people that would come to my divorce recovery seminars, workshops, support groups, they're the ones that did not want the marriage to end. So that would be my encouragement to the church.
You know,
Start
Laura,
with
I
restraint.
was just going to respond about, because you say about the church responds that way, and from my own experience, I actually had a church and community that lovingly cared for me, supported me, and
Wonderful.
I really believe in my healing. That was key.
Yes.
But I think one of the biggest things, you say the loss of, we talk about the loss of dreams.
Yes.
And I think also the place in which, even for myself, the sense of rejection and abandonment. How does, I mean, I know my own journey, but I mean, if you were going to give even like a soundbite to somebody, how do you, as a person, being rejected and abandoned by someone who you completely gave yourself to, how do you walk through that and make sense of it?
Yeah, it really is hard, and it doesn't come quickly. That's the thing I would really encourage people, is so often we live in such an instantaneous world. In particular, if we're looking at Hollywood, you know, these people hop in and out of marriages quicker than you can get a Happy Meal at McDonald's. So don't use that as your role model for, and I'm not, you know, saying negative things about Hollywood. It just gives the image that you can get over this quickly. And so you're talking about the death of the dream. So often I meet people that their marriage died over a long period of time. See, my marriage died like a plane crash. Boom. One day, found out he was out and in another relationship, and it was, you know, on its way to over. But many people say to me, I don't feel that grieving process because my marriage has died over a very long period of time, like a slow-growing cancer. But you see, as you said, there's the death of the dream, the death of the covenant, and the death of what should have been. And see, if we don't grieve those things, so that rejection needs that grief, that needs that grieving process. And we don't like grief. We run from it. We want to numb it. We want to medicate it. We want to get over it as quickly as possible. So my first suggestion of advice would be walk through the pain, not around it. don't numb it with drugs or alcohol or a new relationship. That's the worst thing somebody can do. So.
Now, Laura, am I right? You were 29.
Yes, I was 28, 29, somewhere.
You were
So long ago, I'm having a hard time remembering.
you were young, and you were a baby Christian.
Yes.
You were new in the faith.
Yep.
You still felt like a failure.
Yes.
And considered suicide.
I did.
I want you to talk about that because I'm sure many identify with it. But what difference did your personal faith make in this journey?
Yes, well, I probably wouldn't be here if I hadn't, even though I was a baby Christian. Divorce for me was the biggest failure that anybody could go through. My parents had divorced. I had one goal in my life. I will never be divorced. This was like the ultimate worst thing that could happen to me. So when my husband walked out of the marriage, this for me was the ultimate failure. This was you. Now it's valid. Everybody knows it. You are a loser. You are unlovable. You are fat, ugly, stupid. Any negative thing you can think to name yourself is how I felt about myself. And so that's why I seriously contemplated taking my life during that time. I was drinking very heavily, which is not advisable at all, but to numb the pain. I was such a baby Christian and I just didn't know, there were no support groups. I just, I didn't do that for a long period of time, but I did do it for a season of time. And it just made me so depressed. But if I would sit by my stereo, this goes to show how long ago this was, I would sit by my stereo and play worship music. I couldn't pray. I was too weak and too devastated to even pray. But I could sit by my music and play worship music, just the memory of it even still, and sing those praises to God. And it was the only thing I had. It was like, God, this is all I've got to give you. It's just this music coming out of my mouth, and rescue me. If you don't show up, I will not make it.
Sorry, that's so good, because it echoes me.
Yes.
And I think I'm teary because moments in my bed going, I can't do this.
Yes.
And I remember a girlfriend of mine saying, Melinda, today is not your forever.
Yeah.
And that it's one day at a time, and God is with you. And you say in Hebrews, right, is it that God has never left me or abandoned me.
That's
people
right.
can leave and people can go, but God's promises is that He will never leave or abandon.
right.
I think those promises are the things that will get anyone through, because that's all you've got.
That's right.
And so I resonate with the worship music. I brought my journal. I remember they said, if you can't say it or pray it, then write it. And so my journal is full of prayers and anger and grief and pictures and things of my life.
Yes.
In a way of just being able to express all the emotions and the grief.
Yeah.
And it really is more of a life grief book through that season of my own separation.
It really is.
well.
And when you look back, in a couple years from now, when you look back on that, you will be able to see more. I can look back now and see where God stepped up and met my needs, my financial needs. I continued to tithe during that, even though on paper there was like no way, even if I didn't tithe, there was no way I was going to be able to pay my bills. And I thought, you know what, Lord, you say test me in this, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to continue. And I sold my wedding gown for almost what I paid for it. My father gave me some money, and he had hardly done that before, but he knew I was in, somebody else gave me a car. A man at church stepped forward to do the maintenance on that car. God just kept providing for my needs through people, through churches, through just little itty bitty things that would come to me. And that,
a husband to the husbandless.
that's right. He kept saying to me, I am your husband, Laura, and I don't love like people love. I won't walk out. It was hard to trust him during that.
Say that again, because I think for a lot of our viewers, because we have 40 to 50% of people divorcing in and out of the church.
That's right.
Right? But you just said that I will not walk out on you.
Yes, and God does not. God is patient with us. We cannot out-sin His love. Even during that season when I said I was drinking too much and making some poor choices during that time because my grief was so heavy, certainly I had to turn and repent for some of the things I did during that time. But I think it's so important to know that we cannot out-sin the love of Christ. That when we say in the church that divorced people have no value, that they can't have ministry anymore, we are saying that divorce is more powerful than the blood of Jesus Christ. That is what we are saying when we say that.
Preach it, sister.
I love it. I love it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Those are words of life, you know, for anyone going through it. That's great.
It is so, and I mean, if he could redeem me and pull me out of that pit of despair, depression, drunkenness, and feeling like I had no value, zero value, no one will ever love me again, is what the evil one whispered in my ear. Look at, this is the proof. You are worthless. And I had to just keep putting God's word. So the first season I did, do some destructive things, and I don't recommend that. But eventually when I came to my senses and realized,
So
my Christian friends.
You're saying allow God to fill the vacuum that this lost relationship creates in your life. Don't try to fill it with, drugs or alcohol or even another relationship right away.
Biggest mistake people make is jumping into a new relationship because it numbs the pain. See, it anesthetizes the hurt in your heart. Someone thinks I'm pretty, someone thinks I'm smart, someone thinks that I have value. And so we get trapped in that praise and that high that you get of a new relationship. And what that does is that anesthetizes the grief, the grieving process. It would be similar as if you broke your foot and looked down and said, oh, it's really painful, and then shot it full of Novocaine and said, I'm not having any pain at all. I can walk on this. I can run on this. We can, because it's not hurting right at that moment, but you're doing more damage to that foot over the long run than if you had put it in a cast, elevated it, and said, I'm not going to walk on this foot for a while it heals. That's your heart.
And I think that's what I loved about your book is that you really encourage people to, you explain the stages of grief, you talk to them about going through the stages of grief. And I was really interested in the whole idea you said when one person is determined to leave the relationship and you're trying to hold on, that's never going to work long term. And you said acceptance was really the beginning of your healing.
That's
when
right.
you got to acceptance. What are those stages that people have to go through?
Well, first thing, they go into a denial. They go in, this isn't happening to me. I am a Christian. This doesn't happen to Christians.
Right.
Yeah. Especially wonderful Christians like me,
Yeah, exactly.
It happens to other people. But
That's
definitely
right.
not me.
That's
Yeah.
right. That happens to women that are like bad to their husbands, and I've tried to be so good to my husband, so it couldn't possibly be happening to me. So it's sort of that denial. And then you go into a loneliness or a depression. You really sink into the pit. And it's important to know that the stages of grief don't go in like a set
Order.
calendar.
Yeah, no,
You
yeah.
float in and out of those. There's a sense of anger. You go through a phase of deep rage and anger because you feel so out of control. Someone else is determining my future. See, I chose to be married, but being divorced was chosen for me.
You've been betrayed.
It's been betrayed.
And I'm so angry.
It's not fair. How can they do
Somebody's
that?
got to pay.
That's right. Justice. Right.
And then you move on into an acceptance, more of a, okay, if you're getting healthy, if you're part of a support group or you're getting healthy counsel, some people stay stuck in that. So I meet people 20 years later, they're still circling the drain of anger and bitterness and how dare you do this to me. So it's not an automatic process, it's a choice to walk through this. And then you sort of go into an acceptance, and that's where you, okay, I'm single again. And then you go in, you have to get to a place of where you learn how to forgive. And a lot of people don't like the word forgiveness, in particular when it comes to divorce. I encourage them to say this one prayer: Lord, teach me to be willing to become willing.
You have beautiful prayers in your book.
Thank you.
You
I get so many
articulate the
emails of people
prayers.
telling me, your prayers alone were worth the book.
And that's key because a lot of times, and in my own experience, you can get stuck in me.
Yes.
Woe is me. I didn't deserve this. I just want to cover, my face and not get up.
Yes.
And always, my church, the girls here on the couch, my parents, they were always like, Mel, eyes off you, eyes on God. And it was something. It's like I would do that. I would actually sing worship songs in my car.
Yes.
I'd write in my journal. But as soon as you turn your eyes on God and in worship, everything changes.
Yes.
It's a sense of, wait a second, there's peace, there's love, I'm receiving, I'm hearing,
Yes.
and there just is a sense of that true sort of security in Him versus everything else that's falling apart in my own life.
Right.
And this is a woman's number one need, isn't it? Safety and security.
That's right.
Which
It is.
becomes the tender trap if you're reaching out for the replacement man in
That's
your life.
right.
Yes.
So we want it to be the Lord.
People who remarry within 2 years of their divorce have an 80% divorce rate.
Really?
Yes. So that's why another reason why it's very important to refrain from become single again. Become a whole, healthy, healed, single again person before you step into a new relationship. Don't look to that relationship to fix you, to mend you, because it doesn't work. It ends up being a crisis.
Laura, your book is When I Do Becomes I Don't. Excellent resource. Where can people pick up a copy of this book?
Almost anywhere, major bookstores, anywhere books are sold, or if they don't have it at the store, they can order them online, Amazon, any place that you normally buy. You know, it's with a major publisher, so it really can be get anywhere.
Everyone needs this book. I mean, I know that we plug books, but I mean, every person that's going through
Yes,
divorce,
because I have a whole chapter, Someone I Love is Divorcing. And so it explains what to do and not to do for the friend, family member, coworker that is divorcing, because we all know somebody.
Laura, thank you so much for being with us on Full Circle. And I just want to remind you that the phone number that you've seen throughout this half hour is our prayer line. And someone is there to talk with you, pray with you if you're going through some really dark times in your life right now.